Greetings and welcome to this conversation. It is a great pleasure and privilege to have the European Commissioner for International Partnerships, Jutta Urpilainen, join me as she approaches the end of her 5-year term and prepares to hand over the reins to a new commissioner. So Jutta oversees the European Commission's work on international cooperation and sustainable development, and she's very kindly agreed to share her reflections on and insights into the highs and lows of the past 5 years and the headwinds she also sees on the horizon. Jutta, thank you very much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to discuss with you.
Wonderful. So, Jutta, why don't we start by looking back at some of the fundamental shifts in the development landscape over the course of the last 5 years. I mean, the world has changed dramatically since you took up office 5 years ago. The global economy has been rocked by multiple shocks, from COVID-19 to 2 wars that continue to dominate world affairs, to climate-related disasters that continue to increase in frequency and severity. I mean, these events have had enormous geopolitical and socioeconomic consequences. And we've also seen that it is the poorest populations in countries inherently vulnerable to shocks that have the least capacity to manage when crisis hits. They've been contending with a deeper, more protracted crisis that has, in fact, reversed trends of economic convergence and shrinking poverty and inequality. And they now face a massive debt crisis. So in the face of COVID-19, the EU and its member states set out a common approach through Team Europe. And then in response to China's Belt and Road Initiative, the EU launched the Global Gateway, which we will come on to talk about. But Jutta, can I just ask you, as Commissioner for International Partnerships, how have you approached some of the storms and challenges over the last 5 years? I mean, if you could tell us what you're most proud of and perhaps what you would have done differently with hindsight.
Well, I have to admit that these last 5 years have been very different than I expected. So in 2019 December, when I started as a Commissioner for International Partnerships, my main focus was fighting inequalities. That was a kind of compass of mine. And actually that has been since I became a politician long time ago in Finland, in my own country. But indeed, in the beginning of 2020, I would say that the whole world changed because of the COVID, and also COVID impacted a lot to our agenda within the European Commission. So we needed to react quickly and fast. We needed to pool resources. We needed to find more resources in order to help our partners in the global south to address COVID-19. And actually the concept which we were able to create in the middle of the COVID was the Team Europe concept. And I have to say that this is one of the concrete things I'm very proud of my term or mandate as a Commissioner for International Partnerships, because traditionally the European Union and our member states, we have been the biggest ODA provider in the world. But now through the Team Europe concept, we can be even better partner. We can be more efficient. We can set common objectives, and we can see also better results. So I'm very happy that we were able to create this new way of working as a one team. Of course, it's not perfect yet, but I think right steps have been taken into a direction where the European Union, together with its member states, can be stronger and more reliable partner for our partners in the global south. So I would say that this is definitely one of the legacies of mine, one of the highlights. And it has also helped us to create then new initiatives for the international partnerships as or like the Global Gateway Investment Strategy, which we then adopted in the end of 2021.
And Jutta, is there anything you would have done differently looking back?
Well, I think one of the challenges from the beginning, which I faced as a commissioner, is really communication. Taking into account how much funding we provide to our partners in the Global South, and the fact that we are still the biggest ODA, so official development assistance provider in the world, I think we have not been able to communicate about it enough, or I would say so strongly as I hoped. And I think we also recognize this. We have made some surveys in our partner countries, which really also show us that even though we have been one of the biggest donors in many of our partner countries, for instance, in Africa, the citizens in those countries do not recognize that. And I think this is something I think hopefully my successor would put the highest priority of the agenda to really strengthen the visibility and common communication of Team Europe in order to also increase the recognition and acknowledgement of our work in our partner countries.
Great. So let's talk about the sort of relationship with partner countries, and in particular EU-Africa relations. So the EU has repeatedly promised a new partnership with Africa based on mutual respect, solidarity, mutual listening. But, we've seen broken promises, we've seen double standards, we've seen, differences of approaches. And all of this is essentially undermining the EU's credibility. Now, next year, we have yet another EU-AU summit, which will be scheduled. And in fact, in her last State of the Union speech, President von der Leyen indicated that yet again, a new approach to Africa will be proposed during the summit. So how do you think the EU's relationship with Africa has evolved over time and over the last 5 years since you've been commissioner? And what do you think the key elements of a partnership with Africa need to be?
Well, in general, I would say that the relationship between the African Union and the European Union is very strong, and it's very close. And actually, I'm going to the Addis Ababa, I'm going to the African Union still before my mandate is over. And the idea is really to also take a stock of our relationship and what is the progress made since the summit 2022 between the African Union and the European Union. So in the summit 2022, we promised to boost investments to Africa up to 150 billion euro until 2027. So by the year 2027, investments up to 150 billion euro to Africa. And we are actually progressing very well on that. So I think what Africa really expects from us is walk to talk, so that we are able to start tangible projects which are then benefiting the citizens of African nations and societies. At the same time, I think it's important to recall that Africa is a mosaic. There are over 50 very different countries. And I would say that when we look at the relationship between the Africa and Europe, the relationship is very different comparing to the different parts of Africa. It's not a secret that our relationship with Sahel, so with the West Africa, is currently more difficult as it was some years ago. Despite the fact that we have been a very strong ODA provider and supporter to that region for a long time. But because of the military coups and the recent political development in that region, it has also caused some difficulties to our relationship. When we look at, for instance, the Horn of Africa, or if we look at the Southern Africa, I would say that the situation is very different. But in general, what has been my objective as a commissioner is really to change this donor-recipient kind of relationship into equal, mutually beneficial partnerships where we can respect each other, we can trust each other, and we feel from both sides of the table that actually we are benefiting of that partnership. And I think we have managed to do that, and that has been a high priority of mine. Maybe the third element when it comes to EU-Africa relationship and partnerships is actually the role of young people. Africa is the continent of youth. There are 1.3 billion young citizens in that continent, and actually 65% of those citizens are below 30 years old. And that's why I have put a strong attention to young people and really try to empower them through education, but also through special measures like Youth Empowerment Fund, as well as I have tried to engage with young people. I had my first special advisor on youth from Africa. We have created youth sounding boards in several African countries through which young people can engage with EU policymakers and give their own impact to our policy development. So these are the elements which are also important, taking into account that how the relationship between these two continents will take shape in the future, that we invest in youth, which are the majority of the citizens in Africa.
Thank you. So that's a perfect segue into a discussion that is, critical at this point, which is really around the EU's global gateway. You mentioned it, sort of flagship initiative, really infrastructure and connectivity plan of 300 billion euros, of which 150 billion euros for Africa. And in fact, it was presented as the EU's answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to create links, not dependencies. Now, its main selling point was really around investment quality, and it places a strong emphasis on delivering infrastructure to the highest standards of sustainability, governance, and transparency, all in contrast to Chinese finance. The Global Gateway really, though, has European interests at its core, but it also recognizes that ownership and the interests of its partners are crucial to making it a success. Has the Global Gateway, in your view, lived up to its unique selling point of delivering quality, sustainability, and transparency? And in particular, if you could say something about, how you are trying to respond to the needs of partner countries in defining Global Gateway initiatives.
Well, Global Gateway strategy was adopted 2021 December because we understood that there is a huge gap of investments in our partner countries in order to achieve sustainable development goals. And there are many reasons for that, not only because of COVID or climate change, but there were several different reasons why we were not able to able to boost investments enough in our partner countries in order to accelerate green and digital transitions. So we wanted to create the Global Gateway investment strategy, up to 300 billion euros investments by 2027, focusing on 5 different policy areas and policy sectors. So energy, transport, digital, as well as health, education, and research. So not only hard infrastructure investments, but also investments in an enable environment, which is important. So far, we have adopted 225 Global Gateway flagships across the world. And if I look at Africa, there are big Global Gateway flagships like MAV Plus, through which we want to start vaccine and medicine production capacity and manufacturing in African countries so that we could produce medicines and vaccines in Africa for Africa. And through that also strengthen the self-reliance and resilience of Africa. And I think it's important because what we learned in the middle of the COVID was that Africa still imports 99% of the vaccines it uses and 94% of the medicines it uses. So there is a huge need to strengthen the resilience of Africa in terms of vaccines and health products. In a similar way, I would say that when it comes to critical raw materials, which is, of course, very high on the political agenda, I would say everywhere in the world at the moment, I think we have already signed memorandum of understanding with 4 African partners. And one of them is Namibia, where I have visited myself, where we have adopted a clear roadmap how that partnership on critical raw materials and green hydrogen can be beneficial for both sides, so that we Europeans, we get minerals and critical raw materials from Namibia to our green transition in Europe. But at the same time, also Namibians, the ordinary citizens, are getting more education, are getting more training, are getting capacity building, are getting strengthening their institutions through our partnerships. So I think these are good examples of the mutually beneficial partnerships, which is at the core of the Global Gateway. But indeed, our aim is not to create new dependencies, but vice versa. On contrary, our aim is really to strengthen the resilience and independency of our Global South partners. And I think it's important because our partners, they don't want to be subject of aid. They want to be actors themselves. And that's why it's so important that we help them to stand by their own feet. And of course, the Global Gateway is a great tool for that, taking into account that it's not only about public resources, but it's also very much how the public resources are leveraged in order to also get more private investments and private money to our partner countries.
Jutta, let me just pick up on this point about the importance of human capital, health and education, and the evidence actually shows that there are higher economic and social returns to infrastructure. They are higher when accompanied by similar levels of investment in health and education. But how can the European Commission ensure that human capital actually forms an integral part of Global Gateway initiatives rather than just as an add-on?
That's a very good question. And actually, that has been a priority for me since the Global Gateway strategy was developed or was created or was adopted. So first of all, 20% of our external funding is dedicated to human development. And I took a decision as a commissioner to increase our funding to education from 7% to 13%. So 13% of all our external funding under my responsibility goes to education projects. And for me, it has been very important from the beginning to ensure that the scope of the Global Gateway is broad. So it's not only infrastructure, hard infrastructure, but it's also investing in soft connectivity. And for instance, in Africa, we have a big teacher training initiative for sub-Saharan Africa, 100 million euro. It's a Global Gateway flagship, but also Team Europe approach initiative where several of our member states are contributing to. And the idea is to train more teachers for Africa, because there is a huge lack of teachers, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, but also improve the quality of teacher training, because we know that even though children and pupils, they have access to education in some parts of Africa, the quality of education is very poor. And that's why the aim of this teacher training initiative is twofold. So the idea is really increase the number of teachers, but also improve the quality of teachers. And I think this is a very good example of also this kind of a human capital driven Global Gateway flagships, and there are many others, but this is of course very close to my, I would say this one is close to my heart because of my background as a former teacher.
Excellent, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the money now. So since its adoption in 2020, the budget, the EU budget for 2021 to 2027 has been used to respond to multiple challenges. So with billions reallocated to supporting Ukraine, to curbing migration from war-torn countries, to reducing Europe's energy dependence on Russia. Now, the EU's development spending was in fact consolidated and rationalized with the introduction of the Neighborhood Development International Cooperation Instrument, NDICI, Global Europe. But by your own admission, in fact, the EU's overall flexibility, availability of resources, and possibilities for reprogramming had reached a limit. And that undermines the budget's ability to address current and future challenges. Now, we understand that there are planned cuts in EU spending across least developed countries, planned cuts of around 35% for the period 2025 to 2027 when compared to the amounts allocated for 2021 to 2024. Why has the Commission proposed these cuts? And what are your thoughts on the signal this sends to partner countries?
The European Union is the biggest ODA provider in the world. And of course, we are very committed to that, because we know that even though we would get more private resources into the least developed countries and middle income countries, there is always need for official development assistance. NDICI Global Europe is around 80 billion euros. And indeed, it is a new tool for us, and I think it's a very good tool. I was the chief negotiator on that. Of course, I personally believe in it, also the power of it. And actually, through the NDICI, we are able to provide funding to bilateral programs, which we do with our partner countries, but also for regional programs as well as thematic programs. We had MFF review, so there was a decision taken by the heads of states and government in the beginning of this year and that was part of the MFF revision. So the idea was to redirect 2 billion euro funding from budget, which is under my responsibility, to another purposes. And this 2 billion euro cut is now allocated to the different bilateral but also regional and thematic programs. And let's see when the final decision will be taken. I hope that in the near future by the Council and the Parliament. However, what is important is that that we keep our promises to our partner countries, especially to the least developed countries, but also for low and middle income countries, in terms of climate finance, but also in terms of different commitments we have done under the global gateway. In addition to that, what we also propose is that we create a certain specific envelope for the fragile context, because we know that there are also regions like Afghanistan or Sahel or let's say Sudan, where it is very difficult for us to make partnerships or cooperation with the current government. We don't recognize, for instance, Taliban's, or there is no standing government in Sudan, neither in Niger, and that's why we have to find a way how we can still provide assistance and support to the citizens of those countries and societies. And that's what we do through the special measures. We are, for instance, financing Afghan girls and women in terms of health, education, and food security. And this is important for us. So this is a kind of a midterm review of NDC Global Europe, which we have been working on and which we have now proposed to the Parliament as well as to the member states. And of course, we hope that they would adapt our proposal. I think from my point of view, the big question is that what is going to happen 27 onwards. So we know that very soon the next Commission will start to prepare the next MFF. And my humble wish is that that external funding would be part of the next MFF, would maintain there or even increase. And this is something, of course, which is in the hands of the member states in the end. But of course, the role of the Commission is also important because Commission prepares also the next MFF proposal.
And Jutta, is there anything you would change with the structure of the instruments, NDC or the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus? Is there anything you think could be improved further going forward?
I think the main structure is very valid. It's functioning well. We have allocated over 30 billion euros for sub-Saharan Africa. So this is the main geographic priority for us. Of course, also the region or in a geographic region where the needs are highest. But I think that also EFSD Plus as a financial tool for us through which we are able to give guarantees and use blending for different operations in our partner countries, it's very much needed and it's very welcome because that enables us also to work more with our national development banks as well as also European Investment Bank and in that case also with private sector. So I would say that in general, EFSD Plus as well as NDC Global Europe, both are working very well. What we need is more flexibility, and especially flexibility for for those fragile contexts where we are not able to work with the government and we are not able to provide, for instance, budget support, but we have to find a way how to maintain our support to the citizens of those societies. And we normally do that through special measures. And for that, we need more flexibility. And the idea which we have now proposed to create these kind of fragility envelopes for certain regions, I think actually that would be not a silver bullet, but a kind of a new tool to be used.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe we can look a bit forward now to the future. I mean, EU development cooperation really is at a crossroads. So on the one hand, there is a massive and unfinished development agenda in less developed parts of the world, combined with, tackling the world's ills. And then on the other, there is increasing pressure for development to be used as a lever of hard power, as an instrument of influence to reinforce European interests and Europe's economic security. But the problem is, by exclusively focusing on Europe's own interests in its cooperation with partners, and you will know this very well, I mean, it will harm the relationship with its partners and fuel, if you like, conflicts of interest. Now, the Commission is absolutely instrumental in leading on the EU's international partnerships. So what do you identify as key challenges ahead? And how can the Commission, be instrumental in leading a more balanced approach to the EU's international partnerships?
For me, I would say the main thing is really to ensure our external funding and also hopefully to be able to increase the level of external funding within the next MFF. So I fully understand that the European Union and also our member states are very much investing in hard security, in defense, in military capabilities, because the security environment of Europe has changed. But on the other hand, it is important to recall that we have different kinds of security threats. And when it comes to climate change, or when it comes to pandemics, or when it comes to terrorism, all those security threats actually demand international cooperation and partnerships in order to be addressed. And that's why it's important to indeed have a balanced approach. So we need to invest in our own security. We need to invest in our military security and capabilities. But we also need to invest in our international cooperation and partnerships. So this is my first message, and I hope that would be taken into account when the next MFF proposal will be prepared. Then the second point is that geopolitics and geoeconomics are very much intertwined and interlinked. And it means that we don't only face the battle of narrative in our partner countries, but we also face battle of offers. So our partners, they also request or they ask that, okay, what the Europe can offer to us, because they have different offers from different players and actors. And that's why I think that it's so important that European Union is united and we work as a one team, and we have good offer, and we have a positive offer to be offered to our partners in the Global South. And of course, being a mother or I would say initiator of the Global Gateway investment strategy, I think our positive offer is the Global Gateway. And I, from my point of view, of course, I hope that there would be a Global Gateway 2.0 as a part of of the next MFF. But I think the third element I would like to underline is this kind of mutual respect. Because even though we don't always agree or we don't even share the same values, I think it's important to respect each other. And I would say that for me, this is also the DNA of the mutually beneficial equal partnerships, that we can, we can respect each other, and I think this is something what our partners also expect from us, and I think that at least I have tried to behave that way as a commissioner in my duties.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jutta. Very clear message on resources, on the EU's offer, and the imperative of mutual respect. Thank you again for joining me for this conversation. That was really fascinating. Thank you.